Sorry.
Well, so today our topic is loneliness, and this is Anna Bonavita.
I remember myself thinking that I have lost everything. And to the people who helped me, to the bakers who were sitting next to me and who carried me through the most difficult period of my life, I wanted to bring that same feeling here.
But the reality is, I don't know how people find that commonality anymore. I think we're so divisive in our political views and views about social justice and human equality and whatnot. So by the end of this podcast, we'd like you to fix it and tell us exactly what the 3 steps will be.
But she is. It's called a communal table, wine, and soup.
This podcast represents the opinions of our hosts and guests. The content here should not be taken as medical advice and is for informational purposes only. This podcast also does not establish a standard of care, doctor-patient, or client relationship. No guarantee is given regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on the podcast or website. And because each person is so unique, all listeners are encouraged to connect with counseling and medical professionals for assistance with their personal journey. All people, places, and scenarios mentioned in the podcast have been changed to protect the privacy of those involved.
Welcome to We're Not Fine. I'm Dr. Talia Jackson.
And I'm Doug Jensen. We thank you for listening every week to our deep and thought-provoking conversations about relationships. Welcome, everybody.
Hi, guys.
We're going to start this amazing evening.
I don't know if it's a good sign or a bad sign, but our beautiful guest, Anna Bonavita, just said, oh no, we're starting, there's no way out.
Although we were talking before and you are so eloquent in telling your story, so we're looking forward to you sharing it now with everybody.
This hand's going to be a problem for me.
Okay, so...
Every time. Every single time.
Welcome, Anna.
He talks with his hand.
I do talk
in
with
my face
hands.
with a pen. It's very dangerous. It's very dangerous. Friends, we could not be more excited that you all are here. This is literally the best. This is one of our favorite things to do is have these live events. And I do want to give a shout out to Gigi's and Laura, who today is called Jessica. Because she
looks like
reminds
my
Doug,
kid's kindergarten teacher.
Yes.
And she likes Jessica as a nickname.
And so Doug's been calling her Jessica, but her name is actually Laura.
Sorry.
Well, so today our topic is loneliness. And this is Anna Bonavita, and we're going to introduce her. So Anna was born in a small Bulgarian village and educated in Russia. And we're not supposed to talk about the fact that you were a physicist, because that's in another life, but she's brilliant. And a longtime resident of Italy and the US. And you claim several countries as a source of your cultural identity. You're the founder and former president of the Italian Cultural Center, as well as the Italian Film Festival of Minneapolis and St. Paul.
And I'm going to read the next part as well because I don't memorize anything. But I do want to say that when we were doing our names, I was like, Doug Jensen. And you say yours so beautifully. And I'm like, okay, this is going to be like totally one-sided. Everyone's going to want to listen to you. You are also in 2018, you started Esperienza. I'm going to use your accent if I can. I hope that was okay. An organization which celebrates and preserves culture in small Italian villages and towns through authentic immersion opportunities. She believes that away from the fast speed and superficiality of mass tourism, such an issue, we can still unhurriedly appreciate the pleasures of the palate and the joy of Italian culture while giving back to local communities. It's really beautiful.
And you used the word conviviality, and I was like, I'm going to write that down. It's so beautiful. So your latest creation, and the reason why you're here, is because you were recently featured in the Minneapolis Star-Tribune, and you've created the communal table, where a place where social connection is always possible amidst honest food, good company, and local creative talent.
Are you including me in that?
Yes.
Wow, creative. I will tell you also, Anna, of course, you kind of told us, like, if you get off topic, make sure we rein you back in.
You'll be reining us back in.
The whole point of this is for you to just tell your story. So we're going to let you just go with it. Tell us your story. Tell us why we're here, why this is important.
Well, I'm product of globalization. Had I been born 100 years ago, I would have lived and died in a small village. The destiny had different plans for me. So I grew up in this village. I was living with my grandma, and some of my best memories are from this period. The water in the river was clean and was full of life. There was no electricity, no asphalt on the streets. My grandma was telling me fairy tales every night before going to sleep. Every vacation, after I started school, every vacation I will come back to the village. The moment I get off the bus, various people will start stopping me and asking me, who is your grandmother? And even so, my grandmother lived very close to the bus station. It will take me 30 minutes to talk to different people and tell them who I am and how is my mother and whatever. By the time I arrive, my grandmother already knew that I'm coming because people have told her already about this. Another beautiful memory I have of this village, which, by the way, is in a fantastically beautiful area of Bulgaria called the Valley of Roses. It's full of Rosa damascena, which is the rose that is used to make perfumes, expensive French perfumes. There's also plenty of fields full of lavender and walnuts. So the memory I wanted to share with you, because it's related to the subject, is the communal oven next to our house, my grandmother's house. I remember the communal oven, women carrying casseroles and freshly made bread to be baked there, and then sitting around the oven, knitting, talking, children playing around. So this is the environment I grew up.
Beautiful.
And then if you move several years ahead, you'll find me arriving here in 1996 without knowing a single human being. And this is where I begin to experience loneliness, and that's why I'm here today to talk about this.
It's a story of, your story is one of, even if as a child you believed in community, it sounds like, from a very young age. And then after you moved here, and then it's grief and loss of your husband, and then desperately needing to create what you couldn't find anywhere. And so I would love to know a little bit about that, you creating community as a child too. It seems like that's your purpose on the planet.
I guess this is how I was made. I was inspired early on to, in this same village I was telling you about, to build a group of children, 10, 12 years old, and we will go to the houses of elderly people and help clean, do groceries. And yes, it was very fulfilling.
So it's really part of like what you have internalized as important. As Talia mentioned, you also lost your husband, and that was maybe a big piece of why it is that loneliness came about in your life.
Well, I first experienced loneliness when I came to Minnesota in 96. And
for anybody who moved here, you probably can relate to that.
Yeah.
We're not very friendly.
Yes, I don't know how many people were born here, but it wasn't easy in 96 to be a young woman working in a high-tech company, dominated by men. Everyone's local. No one talked to me. At a certain point, I started feeling that I am invisible. So this was my first encounter with loneliness. And the reason why I later created the Italian Cultural Center and the Italian Film Festival, because I wanted to build an island of warmth, of humanity, where everyone who feels like me, lost, isolated, without relatives, immediate relatives, could come and experience conviviality.
Convivia, our new favorite word.
And the Italian culture, which is all about solidarity, kindness, and being together.
Which you don't find so much in America, from what you said.
It took me a long time
Yeah.
to find it.
Yeah.
It was difficult period.
So how did you find it in the 90s?
I decided to be the change I want to see in the world, just as Gandhi inspired us. So, as I said, the Italian Cultural Center was built by a group of volunteers. I was one of these people who started it because I was lonely and I had a dream of people gathering together and sharing their passion for a different lifestyle, for a different way of interacting. I think Minnesota has changed tremendously since then. And maybe some of this doesn't resonate with you anymore. But back then, the Italian Cultural Center made a difference, and I believe it's still making difference because it's giving warmth, especially in the winter.
Which we desperately need, even with this beautiful warm winter. Anna, would you feel comfortable telling us a little bit about losing your husband and what that grief process was like for you?
It's a difficult question. I wonder if any of you have dealt with terminal illness, but the grieving process begins even before the passing by of a loved one, the passing of a loved one. It was perhaps the most difficult period of my life, also because we moved to Italy, to a small provincial town, where, again, I knew no one. I spoke the language to some degree, but I didn't know anyone. I didn't have friends. I didn't have relatives. And at that point, I remember myself walking on the street and crying and thinking that I have lost everything. I mean, my husband, very, very ill, and me surrounded by silence and no one to give me a hand. That was at the beginning. Then you start looking for solutions because there's work to be done every day. And I was very fortunate because there was a small place, similar perhaps to this one, similar to Gigi's, where it's called Punto Macrobiotico in Italian, very focused on the macrobiotic diet, but forget about the macrobiotic diet.
We'll all be able to repeat that word, though, repeatedly.
It was all about people who care about their health, the environment, and the community, gathered every day to eat lunch and dinner. The meals were prepared with love. We were eating the best possible food that this community could prepare. And then, at the beginning, I was sitting alone at a table. But little by little, someone will sit next to me, then another person will sit next to me. We'll have a small conversation. And I start feeling that I have a place. I have a place where I can go. I can be physically nourished, but I also could share some of my sadness, some of my struggle, ask for advice. The people who sat with me at the usual table were the bakers. They were making bread for this community, and I always sat with the bakers, and they told me the stories of how they made the bread, but they also carried me through. And I cannot forget this. I know I can count on them.
Yeah.
And I'm deeply, deeply connected to them.
And they probably smelled good too.
Yes.
Is my guess. It's interesting. You referenced two things, Anna, that I want to go back to. So we didn't talk about this. My professional background has been very much about assisting people die from HIV and AIDS related causes. So that anticipatory grief that you're talking about as the person who is watching a loved one with that illness and eventual death is really complicated. But you also reference, we know the general phases of grief: bargaining, depression, anger, acceptance, and that whole denial and shock initially. But the sixth phase of grief that people talk about is kind of restoring your life and recreating your life.
And making meaning.
Making meaning. And while that's a little controversial to people like myself who have studied grief and spent our life professionally in it, you talk about that. Like, you had to find a way to get through this. The other thing, Anna, that I found fascinating in our initial conversation earlier today, yours and mine, was, as a therapist, I see 8 or 9 people a day. And so at the end of my day, I do not want to be social. I've been talking all day. I love the people that I see, some of whom are in the room. And I'm incredibly grateful for those amazing people that share their stories with me. But I don't have as much loneliness as a result. So when you describe your experience professionally and socially, like, there are very unique contributing factors that everybody has. And that really is reliant probably, or contributes to like what severity level that loneliness factor is. It's a very complicated issue, and it's a pervasively and culturally relevant issue. So I'm glad you're talking about it.
Yes, I'm a manifestation of the problem in a way.
And the solution.
I don't think of the problem at all. In fact, I was going to correct you on that, Anna. Like I told you before, and you talked about, I was obviously an extrovert. Anybody?
In your former life, because you're clearly a wallflower now.
I know, I'm very shy. So, the thing, Anna, though, is you talked about being an introvert. And so for me, it's not hard to engage with people on the sidewalk. And you said if we met on the sidewalk or, on the street, we probably wouldn't talk. I think we would. But I think,
He would make it so.
I would probably
make it
so. And you talk really well. I mean, even sharing your story. But it's interesting to me that someone who has such good self-awareness still struggles with loneliness.
I feel like it's a good time to dive into loneliness, because this is the reason we're all here together. It's the reason when you started the communal table, really deeply experiencing that. And there's nothing more lonely than looking around and seeing so many people that you don't have access to, that you can't have conversations with. But I feel like you have a lot of really interesting statistics about loneliness, and articles and podcasts, and you brought
Speaking of,
she's so prepared. She's much more prepared than we are.
Well, I'll share with you some data, but actually all of this is coming from an amazing document. This is the Surgeon General Vivek Murthy Advisory on Loneliness. So this is a declaration of epidemic. Mm-hmm. We just survived another one, but this one has been long in the making and now is hitting us. I wasn't aware of the degree of the problem until I listened to the podcast that many of you might have heard of. This is Krista Tippett, the amazing Krista Tippett, and she interviewed Vivek Murthy. I highly recommend, if you care about your own health and the health of this community, to listen to the podcast. It's deeply moving. And it made me aware of the document, and I would like to share just some of the data that is shocking and made me realize that it's not me, it is us as a country, as a community. Believe it or not, 30% of all Americans live alone. But what about Minneapolis? In Minneapolis, 41% of the households have only one person living there. We are one of the loneliest cities in the nations. Truly, truly a big problem. Another thing that is absolutely shocking, at least to me, because I wasn't aware of this data, and again, it's all coming from this very well-studied, prepared document, is that on average, every American spends, I should say, at least 6 hours exploring social media.
6 hours a day?
6 hours a day. This is the average. It's much worse for young generations. For the around 30% of all young people, they never disconnect. They're on 24/7.
Which it's interesting, it's called social media, right?
Yes.
When it really doesn't maybe do what it's meant to do.
Yeah,
In
it's
terms of
dying.
connecting,
It's
right?
dying. Yes, the quality, the connection is there. The quality is totally missing.
Yeah.
And it always alienates you more than before you start even.
Well, and it feels voyeuristic because you're watching other people live their best lives while you're sitting alone at home, it sounds like.
The famous envy problem.
Yep.
But look how we spent our time again. So 6 hours in front of a screen per day and only 20 minutes a day with a friend. So 20 years ago, it was 60 minutes. Now it's 20 minutes connecting in person with another human being. These are shocking, for me, these are shocking numbers. And that's why there's a declaration of epidemic.
It's a health crisis, public health.
Well, what's interesting too, you talked about we just survived a pandemic. I'm not so sure we did, and while all of us are breathing in the room. The pandemic was a time when people isolated even further, right?
Yeah.
And so it's an interesting thing. I don't think we've recovered from that. I think a lot of people have not gone back to work. A lot of people still work remotely. And so that social aspect, I know so many huge organizations who are like closing up offices in the Twin Cities because people are not coming back. And it saves a lot of money for them, but they're also worried about losing that social culture. And it's everything you're talking about.
Yeah.
So that's a big factor, I think. I don't think we've recovered. I don't know what the future looks like related to this.
Well, and I think that, after the pandemic, I think there are so many people who are feeling less able to be social or more socially anxious or more afraid to seek out community or sit with strangers. I think people have gotten too comfortable being alone in their home watching Netflix and scrolling.
Yes, the fabric of our society is breaking. And it's everything we have. If you think about it, I remember being at an event when people were asked what relationship means to you. And a woman, an older woman, said, everything. It means everything to me, relationship, real relationship. And we're losing it.
So by the end of this podcast, we'd like you to fix it and tell us exactly what the 3 steps will be.
But she is. It's called a communal table, wine, and soup.
So no one will feel lonely after coming here tonight.
That's right. And you guys
welcome.
can all make a friend that's sitting right next to you.
Yeah, small gesture.
And so I wrote some notes from our first conversation, and the weaponization of loneliness. What does that mean?
This title comes from Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton published an article in The Atlantic. For obvious reason, there's so many articles recently written on the subject of loneliness, and Hillary Clinton is one of them. And the title of the article is The Weaponization of Loneliness. And the basic idea is that we don't trust each other anymore. We're so isolated. As a result, we don't trust each other anymore. And because of this, we are more and more polarized. And because there's lack of trust, this can be used by certain groups to create even more polarization and more lack of trust. So it's what's called in English, not virtuous.
Politics.
Vicious cycle. And there's no way out of it in a way, unless we start talking to each other more. And especially the article is encouraging talking to people who have different views, being very kind, being very good to each other, and somehow reestablish connection so that we can increase trust in each other.
I'm not even sure where to start with that comment.
It's beautiful. I remember, like, I saw something a million years ago where they had people that were absolute strangers from completely different walks of life sitting with each other. And it was something like, don't worry, they're a complete stranger to you now, but you're going to end up loving this person by the end of the conversation. And it's true. It changed so many people's feelings and opinions about.
But I might go a little different direction with this. I think the divisiveness, and it's kind of interesting that you said certain groups might be taking advantage of the fact that we're less trusting. I don't know where that lack of trust is really coming from, but we have the most device culture I've ever lived in. Granted, I'm only 29, but in these, something funny, Talia?
No.
Okay. But the reality is I don't know how people find that commonality anymore. I think we're so divisive in our political views and views about social justice and human equality and whatnot. It would be very hard for me as a gay man to listen to somebody who said my rights are not equal, that I do not deserve them. And I can't have those conversations. So it's kind of interesting. I can't believe we're there, right? But I can't talk with those people. I'm going to stab them with my pen instead. So.
Well, they're lonely as well. These
I agree with
people
that.
lonely
I
as
totally
well.
agree.
And they need food and wine. And kindness. So maybe we start there. I don't know. It's a very difficult
question. Can I throw it in their face if I'm kidding? I'm not helping this conversation.
But I'm taking over your question.
Are you? Okay.
So
You're going in a bad direction, Doug.
Tell us about you were connecting the loneliness and the
I stabbed
sadness.
you. I'm sorry, behind your back.
And do I need to take your pen? I'm always taking his pens away, but then he always finds them again.
You make it incredibly easy to talk about difficult subjects.
We have been told that. That's good news.
That's our only skill. So there's nothing else we'd be able to do.
That's what we need, really. More laughter, too. Not just food and wine.
We do love each other.
Do you think that we could make the mass shooting, which is the next question, that's going to be a hard one to lighten? But you bring together, in our conversation, you so beautifully brought together that, just like you said, that the angriest, most fearful people are lonely. And this is part of the epidemic, that what happens when you're so deeply lonely, and that there's a profile of mass shooters.
Yes, it's a very difficult subject to talk about, but we have to talk about it.
Yep.
We have to face it, since it's happening all the time. The New York Times did serious research of the profile of people in crisis that become mass shooters, so that we can recognize the crisis that is coming. And if you allow me, I will read a piece directly from the article.
Yep.
This is how they describe a potential mass shooter. Depressed, broke, isolated, angry, had no friends, lost job, wife and daughter left him, stopped communicating with his mother, evicted from his condominium. And the concluding line, mass shooters live among us. They are us. They, for the most part, the boys and men we know.
I think when we hear those stories of mass shootings going on, which are really frequent, unfortunately, now in our culture, Talia and I were asked to be on another person's podcast. If anyone remembers Leah, the electrician that we interviewed, and then we were on her podcast about increasing mental health awareness in the trades. She asked us to do a little debriefing with her on a podcast yesterday morning because at her facility, there was a person who was bullied and he stabbed and killed one person, and the person is in critical condition. Another person who was bullying him, and he himself was killed by the cops.
That's right. At their trade school. These are all young men in their early 20s, early to mid 20s.
But Anna, it's interesting because we were talking a lot about what creates bully behavior. And it's, loneliness, it's anger, it's unresolved stuff. Anybody who wants to put somebody else down.
Despair.
What a lovely word. Absolutely. And it's really unacceptable. And one of the things we talked about yesterday is we have to talk about it because we're going specifically to your comment, the people in charge of these facilities where they see bullying happen, whether it's in schools, whether it's in an organization or a company or, a college, we have to start talking about it. We have to start calling it out and stopping it. But it is starting the conversation.
That it's a community problem that we have to take care of each other. And when we're all afraid of each other and everyone is sort of a stranger and we turn a blind eye, it just perpetuates the problem. It's never ending. So we got to all look out for each other.
Well, you said something very important, Talia. You said taking care of each other. I remember arriving in America and beginning to read various articles. And for the first time, encountering the ideas that one shouldn't need others, that we should be very independent in order to get into relationship. We shouldn't be needing. But the truth is, we need each other and we need to take care of each other.
Mm-hmm. And loneliness, there are all sorts of studies about how loneliness triggers physiological and physical responses in our bodies. The stress hormone cortisol is the destroyer of all of our cells. We have a neuroscientist over there that probably knows a thing or two about cortisol.
We'd like to turn the cameras on you right now and have you discuss
We'd
that further.
We'd like you to stand up and talk about everything. But
black stocking hat.
It just messes with our nervous system. We feel more anxious, even less social. It interferes with our sleep.
Yep.
And it makes connecting with loved ones harder. It's just everything about loneliness keeps us lonely. It's hard when you're in that place to want to have these social or just pro-social behaviors and social connections. And I think that people just get quieter and more lonely.
It's a vicious circle. And by acknowledging the problem, we're beginning an attempt to get out of this. Every day.
I'm very struck by something. I think when you talk about a communal table, you talk about coming to Gigi's here and having a conversation with someone at the front.
Yeah.
And just starting that conversation. I'm so curious how many people would really be open to that. And like you said, the goal is to get people to be open to it. The goal is to create a more trusting community where we can really say hi to each other instead of wondering why that person is saying hi to us. And, I tend to be a little bit extroverted. And so why does everybody laugh when I say that? But, there's a part of this that I don't generally get a negative response. I was at my buddy Jeff's house last night, and I walked up to one of the guests for the first time. I said, "Can I touch your hair?" And Jeff laughed really hard, and she was like, "Sure." And I'm like, "Why would you let me touch your hair?" But I wanted to. It was so beautiful. And so it's interesting how many different people are different in that way. And so I'm kind of curious about the cultural piece. I don't think, we talk about Minnesota nice. I do think a lot of us are genuinely nice people. But of course, Minnesota ice is the joke. That we're not very friendly and that we're not all together looking at people on the street and saying hi.
And that we'll give directions to someone to anywhere except for our own house.
So back to the topic of communal table, I'm kind of curious what you experienced. Did everybody welcome eating together and talking. You identify being an introvert, but that's a bold thing to do. It's a risky thing to start conversations with people.
Yes, it's not easy.
Right?
It's not easy, but we all want it because this is how we are programmed. For millennia, we have survived because we have been together. As the Surgeon General says, the one person that wanted to be totally independent and not needing anyone got eaten by animals or starved. So we are absolutely programmed to be together.
Yes.
And
So we don't get eaten.
That's real motivation
by
to be social.
animals.
To not be eaten by.
Yes.
No, but this is
I'm with you. I get that.
millennials.
Yep.
Millennials.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it's deeply ingrained in us. The same way we need water and food, the same way we need social connection. This is actually recent research that it's very exciting to me in a way, because if you're aware that social connection will reduce your probability of dying from cardiovascular disease, will make you happier, will create a better community, you name it. If you know this, of course you reach out. But until very recently, we're told something different. Be independent, don't need,
Very American values, right?
It is American values, for sure. I'm very struck by social media conversations because I did grow up. I'm old enough to remember when we had a party line at my parents' farmhouse. We did not have cell phones. We barely had a TV. I didn't grow up with a lot of money, so I didn't have those options. I had to find a different way of interacting, and we would walk over to the neighbor's house and see if they wanted to play, my two sisters and I. And they were German, so they had 15 kids and drank beer for our snack. So that was a little shocking.
Instead of fruit snacks and granola bars.
Yeah, it was not that. You want a beer? No, I don't. So, I think, Anna, the interesting piece about it is it really has changed how we communicate. And Talia, you referenced that there becomes this kind of social competition because people are baking dozens of cookies. It looks like their life is always blissful all the time, or they're taking half-naked pictures on beautiful beaches in the world.
Wait, are you looking at me from our trip to Mexico?
I got some from you, yeah.
Yeah, but we don't have to go into that. I just
How many Speedos did you take pictures of?
They were
With
so
yes on the X.
amazing. I'm probably going to jail and they're going to whisk me off immediately after this. But I may or may not have found a couple of people on the beach that were wearing these Speedos that on the back it said OMG.
And yes.
And I have taken a few pictures without asking
Here's my
them,
phone.
and I sent them to
Doug.
one or two people who are keeping them very private and destroying it immediately. No one will
They're
ever
on my
know.
phone. They're on my Instacart.
Except for
no,
Doug.
My Instagram.
Except for Doug.
Yeah.
Were you in the middle of a sentence?
I might have been. I don't remember now because I'm thinking about those pictures.
I know
Was
you
there
were.
a store with Speedos with a word on the back?
No, it was like somebody brought them from their hometown and felt really confident and really good. And I was not making fun of them. I would just like to say I was appreciating their pizzazz.
I don't know that that's what you were appreciating.
I was. There was so much appreciation of the pizzazz. Anna, will you tell
Anna,
us?
we go off script oftentimes.
Please do.
How did you decide to recreate this life-giving, life-saving experience? How did you decide that I'm gonna make this happen in Minneapolis?
Well, out of desperation, out of necessity. So, as I mentioned earlier to you, I found friends in Italy who I knew will be always there for me. And I didn't want to come back. I decided to stay in Italy. However, I started receiving calls from my son almost every day saying that you're going to be a grandma, you have to come back and help.
Yep.
Yes, so eventually I came back very reluctantly because I knew what is waiting for me. I knew that it's going to be difficult again. Decided to be proactive, since that's all we have.
Yeah.
Sent a mass message on Facebook. I am back. I would love to connect. Please get back to me. And very few people responded. And the one who responded says, I'm busy right now, but maybe in a month or so. So this was not very inspiring. And at this point, I decided that I have to start investing in social connection. And that I owe this to myself and to the people who helped me, to the bakers who were sitting next to me and who carried me through the most difficult period of my life. I wanted to bring that same feeling of camaraderie, of total support here. And this is how the communal table was born. In a way, I wanted to recreate Italy again here.
I think it's definitely what we need. What Minneapolis needs is more Italy.
What's interesting about this is two things. Anna, it's striking to me that a lot of people come to us as therapists with loneliness, or they're looking to date, or they're looking to figure out how to connect to other people. And I think there are resources. I've referred people to meet up, and there's a number of different apps out there, but those apps are grueling for some people. And so we oftentimes guide people on how to do that. But when I think about this, I think about like a meetup group that you might create. It's a website, right? And invite people to do this. There's a number of people that do that. I know in my particular LGBTQ community, there's a great deal of loneliness. There's a great deal of judgment. There's a great deal of hierarchy created in our community, which I try very hard to do my part to get rid of, but it doesn't work easily. I also think it's in every community, though, is what I really think. And we have to start making efforts. So I think the idea of like the communal table here, which is not common. We don't have a lot of these opportunities. I think about like funerals where you end up sitting with people at big tables in church basements, et cetera, or synagogues or whatnot. I think there's all kinds of different ways that people do that at those events, but we don't do it regularly. I still want to give you kudos, though, because there's something very risky about approaching people. There just is. And you're doing an amazing job. Go ahead.
Well, this is how it's done. Every Thursday.
This is the fix it, folks. Here's your answer. Go ahead.
Every Thursday, right here, there's a communal table. And people come and we don't know each other, but we're all hungry. So we order food, we order wine, and conversations begin to flow little by little. Then we introduce each other. And then we discover that there's a lot of communality. That we share a lot. And we also have an additional glue. We bring an artist or an author or a musician for a short period of time, not to dominate. It's not a concert, but just to give us an additional subject to be connected, to talk.
It's beautiful. And I met you because my beautiful mother, who's here at her first event.
Talia's mother at the end of the table there. Yep.
She went to one of your communal tables and she was telling me about it. And I was like, what? Never heard of such a thing.
Yeah.
Actually, this is a great example of how technology can be used for good. Because my friend Greta, who lives in Poland, she contacted
it was my mom's
your
friend,
mother and
Greta.
tell her, you should go to Anna's event.
Nice.
So use social media for good.
Full
can be.
circle.
We also made a notation when you walked in that you had never noticed this painting despite being here, right behind you.
This hand.
Is this okay? Does
Much
this feel
better.
okay?
Much better.
Are you okay? But it's interesting how this person is crying, right? And you were very struck by it when you noticed it. So and it's called release, which as we start communicating about these things, there's a great deal of sadness out there in so many ways. So it is this opportunity. I agree with you. I think social media or the internet and technology can be used for obviously very good reasons.
Anna, how is this mission to create community, conviviality, how has it grown and changed over time? Like when you first started, I know you did many different iterations of creating community.
So I came back, as I said, because I became a grandma. And it was 2017. And I approached local co-ops because I thought the co-ops are ideal for this. They have the organic food. Their mission is to create community. And they need a little bit of something new to become what they really are destined to be, a place where people connect. Because you don't connect through shopping. And they have become like upscale shopping center. Yeah. So I presented the idea to various co-ops, and one co-op agreed. That was the Friendship Co-op on 38th Street. And we tried it, but there was not enough. There was something missing. So I dropped the idea and focused on something different, which is called Esperienza. And this was, in a way, related. Even so, on the surface, Esperienza looks like travel agencies that will take you to Italy, but it's not. It's a non-profit organization with the idea of taking small groups to small villages and towns in Italy where people can experience Italian lifestyle, because I think that this is one of the best templates we can use for rebuilding community. There's a lot of food, wine, sitting at the table with locals, making connections, even friendships. People start coming back again. So I focus on Esperienza, and then the COVID came. We couldn't travel. Right. We couldn't get together. I became very depressed because my worst nightmare was materializing, but it was a nightmare for everyone else. We couldn't be more together. Luckily, it's behind us. They're behind us, those difficult times. And just being right now with you make me so happy because we could be together. We could celebrate each other in so many ways. And this is also the idea behind the communal table. And I restarted it after hearing the podcast that I talked about earlier. I cried through the podcast, and then I decided that the communal table need to come back because we are all called to make a difference for ourselves and for others. We need to rebuild the social infrastructure. We need to what's the word in English? We need to repair the social fabric because we are all going to be better off when each of us is better off.
What a beautiful kind of way of summarizing everything you said. Anna, you've inspired me. I'm actually going to Italy this fall for a significant birthday of mine. Nobody tell anybody what that is. I heard you almost say it.
I'm going to whisper, don't tell.
Anyway, but how encouraging is this and really motivating, I think, to repair our structure, and especially for those people experiencing loneliness. And not everybody is, but of course, for those people, it's really painful. And we see a lot of that in our practice. And when you talk about the depression and the anxiety and the rage and the anger, we obviously are in professions that help treat some of those things. Thank you so much for everything you have shared. We would love to open this up to our audience. If anyone has any questions, anything for her whatsoever.
We probably need to repeat what she said because there was no microphone. I think Jamie's getting it out now. But for those that couldn't hear what she said, she was talking about how the loneliness is due to sort of the curse of economic growth, that in small villages or third world countries, or if you're a new immigrant, you can't afford the luxury of living alone. And so you may not have resources or money, but you're not lonely because you live with many generations or friends or...
Well, and I think in general, the immigrant communities are very, very familiar with this. You know, anybody who comes to the U.S. as a refugee or whatnot, there are groups of people living in those small apartments. So, and I appreciate kind of your humor about that. Like, I bet they're all like, I want my own bedroom. They wish they could be lonely. I wish I had some time alone, but it's a really good comment. Thank you for offering that. Anybody else have something to offer?
Okay, so I'm wondering, I feel like I would think that people's biggest fear is like not knowing how to small talk with people that they don't know and being like, oh my God, I don't know this person, then I'm going to have to chit chat. And do you do like icebreakers, or how do you kind of like help people? Because especially if they're lonely, they might be like extra awkward at figuring out how to like make conversation with people.
Yes, which is probably a barrier to people even showing up at events. It's a great question.
Thank you. Bye.
Can you put that on her as she walks out?
That was real pretty.
Well, believe it or not, I am one of these people. Mm-hmm. I am introvert, and unless I'm talking about subjects that deeply matter to me, I'll be silent. I cannot do small talk. However, in a group of 20 people, there's always a couple of people that are just like you.
What?
And they tremendously help. Yes, I mean, I've been laughing the whole hour.
I'm so glad you are. By the way, you walked right up to me and started talking, which speaks so much to your, but you also said that was because you were passionate about this topic.
Yeah.
So you literally got up from that chair and walked over to me and started talking to me earlier. And I'm like, you're not that introverted. That was... You know, I'm not an easy person.
But that doesn't mean she's not introverted. It probably takes some extra effort, right?
Definitely.
But also, like, you have created a space for maybe introverts to come and connect, hoping to attract one or two extroverts to get the party started. But then the rest of it.
And going back to Leslie's question, with the camera on her again, I'm kidding. This is what I want to say. Like, I still wonder, like, does it require people like myself who are easily engaging to start it? But you are starting this. Like, you are somebody who made this happen. So I'm guessing you have a way, but you're passionate about this. So maybe you felt very welcoming of the people coming.
Well, I'm doing the programming. So, as I said earlier, we are bringing artists to talk about it. We're bringing a musician. I'm part of an amazing community called the Argentine Tango Society.
Oh, that sounds fun.
We had a couple of demos right here of Argentine Tango.
Can you show us?
Yeah.
Does anyone want to dance? Somebody? Anna's going to show us.
One of our AB guys. Yeah, John won't do it. Why is that?
Is John hiding under the table?
So we use lovely. This as icebreakers.
That's wonderful.
But and by the way, we're inviting everyone who wants to share their talents with us to come and help us be the icebreaker, because it's better for everyone this way. People who have talents, they would enjoy sharing it, and us, the observers, will learn something, be inspired.
I love that, because it's also, it sounds like you've created it, but you don't feel the responsibility to entertain anyone.
I can't.
But it's inviting everyone to have the spotlight and show what they can do.
Yes, I have this dream. Remember at the beginning of the 20th century, people were still having these home concerts. and they were entertaining themselves because there was nothing else. I mean, there was no radio, no TV, nothing. They relied on each other. And I believe that when we started delegating our entertainment to
A box.
yes, we start losing the connection to each other.
Right.
I mean, even if you're not the greatest violinist, we had a young violinist here playing as well.
Wow.
Even if you're not the greatest violinist, there's some magic in sharing a piece of music with others. So
I've
we
never
all
played violin,
uplifted.
so I would not be a very good violinist, but I would still
I think
try.
she just invited you to
I think she did too.
showcase your skills.
And I think you and I need to dance
I think so.
for the conclusion of this podcast. Does anybody else have anything else as a question? Please, please, please.
I'm a nurse, and I remember a time where I was working on Christmas Day, and I had a veteran who had he had surgery on one leg, and then he fell and broke his other leg. So he was pretty immobile. He didn't have any family or friends around, and I was his nurse and trying to humor him and get him to open up to no avail. Well, then I learned that the Jewish war veterans were downstairs handing out donuts and coffee and cookies and whatnot. So I thought, okay, I went into his room. I said, I'm kidnapping you. And he goes, okay. So I load him in a wheelchair. We go downstairs, and the most beautiful little redheaded girl in this plaid dress came up to him and held a small candy cane. And all of a sudden, everything just melted away, and he had the biggest smile.
Oh,
and it was just such a moment.
Such
that
a
was
simple gesture.
Yeah, and it was like, I'm not giving up on this person. I'm going to see what else I can do, what other approaches. And a lot of times I think that's the key, is just trying to have one thing or one effort or one person.
And you
to go
don't
ahead.
realize it makes all the difference in the world.
It does.
It's like it's effortless for one person to do one kind thing, but it couldn't be the difference between life and death, or
Sure.
depression, or feeling like you're a part of the world. That's so beautiful.
I also
Thank you.
really want to say thank you for your service.
Thank
I
you.
truly think healthcare was the most devastated
you.
by the pandemic. So I
Yeah, and
appreciate
it's still going on.
I appreciate
I'm a
that.
critical care nurse taking care of patients who have COVID,
Yep.
and a lot of times too, those are very vulnerable populations of elderly people.
Thank you for
who
saying that.
Have
Yep.
that, so
Yep.
we're still fighting that. Thank
God.
you.
You are appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. We had another question, Emily.
Hi.
Hello. Thank you for hosting this tonight. So,
Thank you for coming.
thanks. I mean, let's say, I don't know, that's a very Minnesotan thing, huh? Thank you. Let's keep going.
Thank you for wearing that outfit. You look amazing. Now you're back to me.
Thank you for not making the waitstaff too uncomfortable, but just riding that line.
Oh, you should have seen it earlier.
He's for sure going to get canceled first.
Yeah, for
Okay,
sure.
Okay.
No question.
So my question is, I was surprised myself that I was unaware of how lonely healing is. And when you do all the work and put it in, especially from a traumatic event or what have you, whatever someone is going through. But for myself, it was something traumatic, and having to leave that and then rebuild community. You put all this energy into healing, and you think suddenly you're going to find all these new people to connect with, and you lose community actually, because you either have to go back into that role with family members or other people,
Yep.
or you connect with people because of that icky stuff.
Right.
The closest I found is like addicts who no longer can be friends with their addiction,
That's right.
but
Holy
then
smokes.
had to come out of that.
They lose a whole community.
Yeah.
Thank you for bringing that up. Yep.
So
During
those
the
are the-
hardest time
Yeah.
in their lives. Yeah.
So I was just wondering if you had any thoughts on finding like a new level of energy or increased capacity after already going through something hard, to then find that trust to rebuild community after that, without feeling like, for me, it was a real slump of energy to realize that I would need to do that or invest in that.
That's beautiful.
That's pretty amazing as a question. Thank you. I don't think we talk enough about that. I want to talk about the addiction piece for a second. Of course, this is why AA is a model, or NA or SA, depending on what your addiction is. That's why those things occur. But I also think that depending on the circumstance, and I just want to focus on that part for a moment, and then you guys can please comment. I think I have a number of clients who have managed to keep some of those relationships But if it's like methamphetamine, of course not. Or if it's heroin or if it's cocaine, you got to get rid of those people from your life because those people are causing you havoc and really put your sobriety at risk. I think it's me.
It's you. You're the thumper.
I am. But I appreciate that. And really how you said so eloquently the piece about through healing, you lose your community oftentimes. And then you reference family of origin, which is a nightmare for some people to have to go back to and rely on.
Right.
So it's very complicated.
What did it for me was dancing.
Oh, yeah.
Really.
Wow.
I cannot recommend dancing enough. Not everyone will embrace it, but it's very therapeutic. I have found this to be one of the best medicine. And I don't know. Each case is different and difficult. But as I mentioned earlier, I happen to be part of the Argentine Tango Society. And at the moment, it's a very welcoming, very supportive environment.
And the thing about dance is that, like whether it's salsa or whether it's tango, like you automatically have partners.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Right? So it's not like it's like gym class where you might be the last person picked. Luckily,
Right.
I did not have that experience. Do you want to? I was just the loud person.
You?
What? Friendliest of the senior class? Anyway, what I will say about this is I think you automatically have a community. It's a really interesting idea. But
I wonder, like, how do we even know? Like, if you're in that kind of a situation where, let's say you are healing and you're trying to be healthier than what your original surroundings allowed or the original people in your life allowed, and it's so lonely getting healthier. But then how do we even know what communities are out there that will be really open and inviting? Because I think that's a big barrier for people. Like if someone's never danced before, or they've never spoken, a foreign language, or they're not into book clubs, how do people even find their people?
You struggle, and somehow through the struggle, the answer will come. I mean, if not dancing, something else. But I think it's, there's awareness and there's help.
Yes.
I want to go back to your question a little bit as well. Regardless of what the healing issue is or what people are going through, whether it's physical and a health condition or whatnot, people struggle to talk about that. People struggle to talk about someone who's struggling. I think about, she put her finger on her nose for those of you who couldn't see her. Like, that's the really hard part. And I will tell you, we, just to put a little note out there, we're going to try to do these live events every 4 weeks. And we have an amazing person coming to talk about OCD and anxiety in 4 weeks. And then we're talking about suicide in 8 weeks. And suicide is one of those things that no one likes to talk about. And our guest is going to overwhelm people with how many suicides she's had in her life. And it's really interesting. I mean, you just don't find people to talk about those things, but we have to get comfortable. And that's where, therapy can help to, push some of those things. But we got to keep talking.
Which is, the purpose, as we're wrapping up, it's the purpose of what we're trying to do is bring these really difficult topics and conversations into the light and have a community and have conversations with wonderful people with different viewpoints and different perspectives. And we are so incredibly grateful that you came and you shared your story with us.
Thank you, Anna.
Thank you so much, Anna.
And I just want to put a little note out to our team. We have AV person John, we have Jamie, we have Supak and Jeff over here, and Rob in the corner there. Thank you all for your support. You don't oftentimes...
Wait, did you say Jeff?
I did say Jeff.
Oh.
Did
Did we forget anyone?
No. Supak is our producer, by the way. She helps us with absolutely everything there is to do about this podcast. And you don't always see those people in front of the camera, so I want to make sure that we say
they're literally the best. And shout out to Gigi's for letting us come here and use their beautiful space. So,
and my new girlfriend, Jessica.
And Doug's new girlfriend.
And our extra Dimples.
So go make sure you go get yourself another drink and some dessert and chill and chat. And we forgot to actually introduce ourselves at the beginning. Is it too
My
late?
name is Doug.
So I think we forgot a very important part.
Did we?
Yes, but maybe we'll do it as we're wrapping up and telling people where to find us. So Dr. Talia Jackson, Doug Jensen, this is We're Not Fine. We've been doing this podcast for a year and a half. We have
some social media.
We do.
But I want to make sure people know how to contact you.
How can people find you?
So, on Facebook, unfortunately.
Go figure.
That's actually a
Boy, I hate technology.
It's from technology, and we'll put it in the show notes.
Yes, so the communal table, we'll be here on Thursday. So feel free to come and experience it for yourself. Every Thursday, 6 to 8. If you want to check on Facebook, there is the communal table page, and you can see what we have done and what is coming. Otherwise, Esperienza.org.
If you want to go travel.
If you want to experience rural Italy.
I'm gonna.
Absolutely amazing.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you so much for coming.